Hey, Squirrel Squad. It's early again. Wednesday, so live at 5 today. And y'all get to see my new baby. Have you seen her on Instagram? Or my community page? That was the surprise. I had my own grandbaby. Well, the stork brought it. The stork. Okay, let's see. Last thing I said was I think, you know, the little boy, I hope I'm at the right doggone place. That little boy that she was her pupil, what was his name, Paul? She went over to his house for tea. And last thing they said, I think, was there was a little birch tree in the garden and it died. Grandma says the salt spray killed it. But I think the dryad belonging to it was a foolish dryad who wandered away to see the world and got lost, and the little tree was so lonely it died of a broken heart. And when the poor foolish little dryad gets tired of the world and comes back to her tree, her heart will break, said Anne. Yes, but if dryads are foolish, they must take the consequences, just as if they were real people, said Paul gravely. Do you know what I think about the new moon, teacher? I think it is a little golden boat full of dreams. And when it tips on a cloud, some of them spill out and fall into your sleep. Exactly, teacher. Oh, you do know. And I think the violets are little snips of the sky that fell down when the angels cut out holes for the stars to shine through. And the buttercups are made out of old sunshine. And I think the sweet peas will be butterflies when they go to heaven. Now, teacher, do you see anything so very queer about those thoughts? No, laddie dear, they are not queer at all. They are strange and beautiful thoughts for a little boy to think. And so people who couldn't think anything of the sort themselves, if they tried for 100 years, think them queer. But keep on thinking them, Paul. Someday you're going to be a poet, I believe. When Anne reached home, she found a very different type of boyhood waiting to be put to bed. Davy was sulky, and when Anne had undressed him, he bounced into bed and buried his face in the pillow. Davy, you have forgotten to say your prayers, said Anne rebukingly. No, I didn't forget, said Davy defiantly, but I ain't going to say my prayers any more. I'm going to give up trying to be good, 'cause no matter how good I am, you'd like Paul Irving better, so I might as well be bad and have the fun of it. I don't like Paul Irving better, said Anne seriously. I like you just as well, only in a different way. But I want you to like me the same way, pouted Davy. You can't like different people the same way. You don't like Dora and me the same way, do you? Davy sat up and reflected. No, he admitted at last. I like Dora because she's my sister, but I like you because you're you. And I like Paul because he's Paul, and I like Davy because he's Davy, said Anne gaily. Well, I kind of wish I'd said my prayers then, said Davy, convinced by this logic. But it's too much bother getting out now to say them. I'll say them twice over in the morning, Anne. Won't that do as well? No, Anne was positive it would not do as well, so Davy scrambled out, knelt down on his knee, and when he had finished his devotions, he leaned back on his little bare brown heels and looked up at her. Anne, I'm gooder than I used to be. Yes, indeed you are, Davy, said Anne, who never hesitated to give credit where credit was due. I know I'm gooder, said Davy confidently, and I'll tell you how I know it. Today, Marilla gave me 2 pieces of bread and jam, one for me and one for Dora. One was a good deal bigger than the other, and Marilla didn't say which was mine. But I but I give the biggest piece to Dora. That was good of me, wasn't it? Very good and very manly, Davy. Of course, admitted Davy. Dora wasn't very hungry, and she only ate half her slice, and then she gave the rest to me. But I didn't know she was going to do that when I give it to her, so I was good, Anne. In the twilight, Anne sauntered down to the Dryad's Bubble and saw Gilbert Blythe coming down the dusky, haunted wood. She had a sudden realization that Gilbert was a schoolboy no longer, and how manly he looked, the tall, frank-faced fellow with the clear, straightforward eyes and the broad shoulders. Anne thought Gilbert was a very handsome lad, even though he didn't look at all like her ideal man. She and Diana had long ago decided what kind of man they admired, and their tastes seemed exactly similar. He must be very tall and distinguished looking, with melancholy, inscrutable eyes and a melting, sympathetic voice. There was nothing either melancholy or inscrutable in Gilbert's psychonomy, but of course that didn't matter in friendship. Gilbert stretched himself out on the ferns beside the bubble and looked approvingly at Anne. If Gilbert had been asked to describe his ideal woman, the description would have answered point for point to Anne, even to those 7 tiny freckles whose obnoxious presence still continued to vex her soul. Gilbert was yet little more than a boy, but a boy had his dreams, as have others. And in Gilbert's future there was always a girl with big, limpid gray eyes, and a face as fine and delicate as a flower. He had made up his mind also that his future must be worthy of its goddess. Even in quiet Avonlea there were temptations to be met and faced. White Sands youth were rather fast set, and Gilbert was popular wherever he went, but he meant to keep himself worthy of Anne's friendship, and perhaps some distant day her love, and he watched over word, thought, and deed as jealousy, as if her clear eyes were to pass in judgment on it. She held over him the unconscious influence that every girl whose ideals are high and pure wields over her friends, an influence which would endure as long as she was faithful to those ideals, and which she would as certainly lose if she were ever false to them. In Gilbert's eyes, Anne's greatest charm was the fact that she never stooped to the petty practices of so many of the other Avonlea girls. The small jealousies, the little deceits and rivalries, the palpable bids for favor. Anne held herself apart from all this, not consciously or of design, but simply because anything of the sort was utterly foreign to her transparent, impulsive nature, crystal clear in its resolves, in its motives and aspirations. But Gilbert did not attempt to put his thoughts into words, for he had already 2 good reasons to know that Anne would mercilessly and frostily nip all attempts at sentiment in the bud, or laugh at him, which was 10 times worse. "You look like a real dryad under the birch tree," he said teasingly. "I love birch trees," said Anne, laying her cheek against the creamy satin of the slim bole, B-O-L-E, with one of the pretty caressing gestures that came so natural to her. "Then you'll be glad to hear that Mr. Major Spencer has decided to set out a row of white birches all along the road in front of his farm, by the way of encouraging the AVIS," said Gilbert. "He was talking to me about it today. Major Spencer is the most progressive and public-spirited man in Avonlea, and Mr. William Bell is going to set out a spruce hedge along his road front and up his lane. Our society is getting on splendidly, Anne. It's past the experimental stage and is an accepted fact. The older folks are beginning to take an interest in it, and the White Sands people are talking of starting one too. Even Alicia Wright has come around since her... golly. What did I do to it? Even Alicia Wright has come around since that day the Americans from the hotel had a picnic at the shore. They praised our roadsides so highly and said they were so much prettier than in any other part of the island. And when in due time the other farmers follow Mr. Spencer's good example and plant ornamental trees and hedges along their road fronts, Avonlea will be the prettiest settlement in the province. The aides are talking of taking up the graveyard, said Anne, and I hope they will, because there will have to be a subscription for that, and it would be no use for the society to try it after the Hall affair. But the aides would never have stirred in the matter if the society hadn't thought it into their thoughts unofficially. Those trees we planted on the church grounds are flourishing, and the trustees have promised me that they will fence in the school grounds next year. If they do, I'll have an Arbor Day, and every scholar shall plant a tree, and we'll have a whole garden in the corner by the road. We've succeeded in almost all our plans so far, except in getting the old Bolter house removed, said Gilbert, and I've given that up in despair. Levi won't have it taken down just to vex us. There's a contrary streak in all the Bolters, and it's strongly developed in him. Julia Bell wants to send another committee to him, but I think the better way will just be to leave him alone, said Anne savagely, and trust to Providence, as Mrs. Lynde says, smiled Gilbert. Certainly no more committees. They only aggravate him. Julia Bell thinks you can do anything if you only have a committee to attempt it. Next spring, Anne, we must start an agitation for nice lawns and grounds. We'll sow good seeds betimes this winter. I have a treatise here on lawns and lawn making, and I'm going to prepare a paper on the subject soon. Well, I suppose our vacation is almost over. School opens Monday. Has Ruby Gillis got the Carmody school? Yes, Priscilla wrote that she had taken their own home schools, so the Carmody trustees gave it to Ruby. I'm sorry Priscilla is not coming back, but since she can, I'm glad Ruby has got the school. She will be home for Saturdays, and it will seem like old times to have her and Jane and Diana and myself all together again. Marilla, just home from Mrs. Lynde's, was sitting on the back porch step when Anne returned to the house. Rachel and I have decided to have our cruise to town tomorrow, she said. Mr. Lynde is feeling better this week, and Rachel wants to go before bedtime. Where did I get that? Rachel wants to go before he has another sick spell. I intend to get up extra early tomorrow morning, for I've ever so much to do, said Anne virtuously. For one thing, I'm going to shift the feathers from my old bed tick to the new one. I ought to have done it long before now, but I kept putting it off. It's just such a detestable task. It's a very bad habit to put off disagreeable things that I never mean to again, or else I can't comfortably tell my pupils not to do it. That would be inconsistent. Then I want to make a cake for Mr. Harrison and finish my paper on gardens and the AVIS and write Stella and wash and starch my muslin dress and make Dora's new apron. You won't get half done, said Marilla pessimistically. I never yet planned to do a lot of things, but something happened to prevent me. And that's it. Chapter 20 is The Way It Often Happens. That's the title. Okay, thanks for listening. Have a great Wednesday hump day. Until we meet again today, when I show you my new baby. Her name is Daisy June. And I'll see you later. Love you. Be sweet. Don't be ugly. Bye-bye.